Hi everybody, this is Agnes from Sediment, and today we are going to do a little experiment with the wine temperature to see how much serving temperature can impact the same wine. Wine serving temperature is of utmost importance. I have been in situations myself where the same wine served at different temperatures was either completely ruined or turned into one of the most exciting experiences. Just last year, I tasted Lambrusco that had received highly praised Tre Bicchieri. I tasted that wine at rather warm temperature and it was not particularly exciting. The acidity was harsh and overwhelming the fruit, while the bubbles seemed aggressive and almost bitter. But I felt I needed to give it a second chance, so I took a bottle home. I prepared a meal and served the Lambrusco straight out of the fridge. The low temperature not only accentuated its freshness, but also highlighted the fruit and intensified its youthfulness and energy. But I also have an opposite story to share with you. I remember not being the biggest fan of Louis Roederer champagne. Once I was meeting a friend at a summer bar and they were serving Louis Roederer by the glass. I ordered it and sat outside in the sun. And somehow the conversation took over and that glass of champagne was left sitting on the table getting warmer. I distinctly remember picking it up and smelling it before I sipped it. All of a sudden, it had so much to offer. It was so complex, rich, and inviting. I realized that I had been drinking this champagne way too cold, and what it really needed was to be served at a much higher temperature than the books say. It had nothing to hide, no flaws, no awkwardness, only beauty that was accentuated by the higher temperature. But before I dive into a few rules about wine serving temperature, make sure you do not take any of this too seriously. Yes, we have rules, and indeed there are some theories that can elevate your wine experience, but in the end, we all experience wine differently. So here are a few simple rules that I follow. The better the quality of the wine, the higher the temperature you can serve it at. Great wine has nothing to hide behind colder temperatures. In fact, it could be the case that a great white Burgundy and a great red Burgundy can almost be served at the same temperature. 12 to 15 degrees Celsius. Yes. If you serve wine too warm, alcohol can seem hot or even harsh. So I would always avoid serving wines too warm, especially those with elevated alcohol. It is also one of the many reasons why you should never serve cognac from a warm glass or, God forbid, warm it up. Alcohol is the first thing that evaporates, overpowering the aromatic compounds we appreciate it for. If you serve wine too cold, it can accentuate bitterness, tannins, and taste thin. Cool temperatures will hide flavors and aromas, so the wine may taste rather acidic, as this structural element will have nowhere to hide. But serve dull wine at a lower temperature and it might taste fresher. In general, I follow these rules, but I do love experiments and experiencing what I have learned for myself. So I have prepared a tannic red wine that I would serve at 16 degrees Celsius. In another glass, I will serve it slightly above 20 degrees Celsius, which many of us would consider a current day room temperature. And I will also have glass served at around 10 degrees, much cooler than otherwise expected for this style of wine. I will taste all 3 wine glasses to see how much the wine changes. Before we taste the wine, let me just tell you quickly about the wine that we're going to taste. So we have Chateau Bouscasse 2019 vintage. This is Madiran. And in Madiran, the dominant grape variety of the blend is Tannat. And the name Tannat tells you something. It is a very tannic grape variety. It is allowed to add grapes such as Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, and Fair Cévadou, which I know quite well right now. And if you are allowed to add Cabernet Sauvignon to the blend to make it a bit softer, to make the tannins taste lighter, it tells you something how tannic this grape Tannat really is. So, all right, let's check the temperature. Is it really indeed 16 degrees Celsius? All right, so we have 16 degrees Celsius. All right, it is also a very deeply colored, intensely colored grape variety. And the nose, I really love the nose here in this wine. It is a bit wild, a bit rustic in a way. You have these really ripe black and blueberries and forest berries. You have some of that smokiness and that meaty character here as well. Maybe it is just me talking about the temperature, but I feel like that a bit lower temperature, those 16 degrees, gives this wine a bit of energy to present itself in the glass. There's also some kind of element, something green, something herbal, not green, more herbal, like garrigue and dried herbs, lavender tea almost. So something floral as well. Let's taste the wine. Okay, from the very first sip, I thought, oh my God, it is a bit too cold than I usually expect red wines to be served. So maybe I overdid myself a little bit. However, I do think that this wine shows itself quite well in the glass. I might not feel those fresh fruit flavors that I felt on the nose so much on the palate. I do feel more the tannin. Tannin is very interesting in this wine. It is not framing, it is all over the wine, it is part of the wine. Wherever I have the wine touching my mouth, be tongue, cheeks, gum, I feel the tannin there. It is not, playing this backbone character as I feel it sometimes in other wines. It is the wine, it is part of the wine in this case. I do feel elevated, part of the crunchy red fruit style type of acidity here in this wine. It is definitely not dominant. It is not overpowering the wine itself. It adds a freshness. And overall, this wine it is interesting. It seems medium-bodied. I usually expect Tannat to be more full-bodied, more, structured, bigger, bolder wine. But maybe it is the case of a temperature. It makes this wine a bit slimmer, but we will see it when we will compare it with warmer and colder wine. All right, so let's move to the room temperature wine. Please remember that we should not serve wines at our current day room temperature. We should really serve red wines at the room temperature that was normal maybe 100 or 200 years ago. 16, 17, up to 18, I would say that would be the max. So let's check what the temperature here we have in the glass right now. So we have 22, slightly above 20 as I was expecting or hoping for. Okay, so let's smell the wine. Okay, interestingly, I don't feel fruit as much. I feel more of that savory, leathery, that smoky character, way more here. In the 16 degrees wine, I felt the fruit immediately when I nosed it. Here I feel the smokiness, the toastiness, that oak character way more, way intensely. And fruit is actually on the background, if any. It's so interesting. It almost smells of smoked meat and cigar box. Wow, where is the fruit? It is the same wine from the same bottle. Let's taste it. I felt the acidity right away and I thought, okay, this is interesting, because usually we will read that acidity is something that accentuates with a lower temperature, but it evaporated, or it cannot evaporate, but it just hid right away after the first sip. And now it is the tannin. The tannin actually feels a bit rustic, a bit drying, but not that harsh, not that dominating as it was with the wine. I wanted to tell you as it was with the wine number one, but it really is the same wine. Tannin seems somewhat softer. It is still elevated and it still has that grip, that power, but it definitely is not as mouth coating and dominant on the palate as maybe I felt it with the wine served at 16 degrees. I don't feel fruit as much on the palate, so maybe this wine is not that fruit driven on the palate altogether, but I do feel that quite long-lasting, slightly bitter tasting finish. It might come from alcohol, although this wine is not that alcoholic. It is like the classic mid-range 13.5 degrees. Maybe it is also accentuated by the tannin texture, but that smokiness, that toasty, that vanilla-like character, I do feel it on the palate as well. Yes, now that I have tasted wine served at 16 degrees and 22 degrees, I do feel that I would prefer the glass at 16 degrees, but we have another wine. No, not another wine. We have another temperature to try this wine at. So this is a wine glass straight out of the fridge, and it should be around 10 degrees Celsius. Let's check. We are on fire today. I was a bit worried how it would be serving wine with these different temperatures and if we would get them right, but we are good. So let's taste it right away because of course we are in much warmer room and this wine will warm up quite quickly. I don't feel a lot of fruit here. I actually don't feel anything really. Maybe if you really concentrate your senses, you feel some blackberry or black currant, but nothing much. No, it is completely muted wine. And of course, as I swirl it around, I do, get something, but you have to pay a lot of attention. It is so interesting because I felt like this wine had completely different tannin texture. I felt like it was almost difficult to talk with you because it just covered my palate so intensely. It just, it dried my palate so completely that it was almost difficult to get words out of my mouth. However, I did tell you when you read about wine serving temperature, it will usually tell you that the acidity is accentuated. I do believe that it is not really accentuated. I think that all the other elements of the wine are muted, so acidity shines a bit more. And I cannot tell you that I feel acidity more in this specific glass than I did in at the 16 degrees or 22 degrees. Yes, and it really seems rather thin, and the tannin texture is all there is. There is not a lot of fruit, neither on the nose, neither on the palate in this specific wine, and it just seems empty inside. I'm sorry, I did like how you were performing at the 16 degrees or maybe even 17 degrees Celsius. 10 for this wine is way too little. I talk with you and all I feel is tannin. And the acidity actually starts to creep up a little bit, on the sides of your tongue, and you have that mouth-watering experience, but it is not covered with anything. It is just slightly raw and slightly naked in this specific case. No, I will stick to my guns and I will tell you, I would be the happiest if this wine would have been served for me at 16, maybe 17, top 18 degrees Celsius. I don't think it showed itself that well at 10 or 22 degrees. So here you go. This is so interesting to have theory and then have for yourself the experience. And this does not require a lot from you. You can do it yourself at home. We don't have to buy 3 different bottles. We can just buy one wine and, put one glass in the fridge, put one glass next to some heating device and one in your room and just, see which wine you prefer better. Of course, in this experiment, we were tackling red wines, and we also have to understand that red wines are very different, and this one is tannic. I specifically chose tannic red style because I wanted to see how the tannins act you know, with different temperatures. But if you choose red wine that has lower tannin and has softer tannin texture, if we talk about Pinot Noir or if we talk about Garnacha or Gamay, you might want or you might prefer actually a bit cooler, you know, cooler wine. So thank you very much for watching this video. Let me know in the comment section below if you have done a similar experiment and what is the perfect serving temperature for a red wine for you. And make sure to watch this video next.